From a single spark comes a raging fire. It's that simple. That's what human beings do. That's how it starts. It doesn't look impressive. It looks almost impossible. And from those few sparks comes something that you never know where it will go and what difference it will make.
Learn how leaders can become the next generation of mentors. Winning with Ian Chisholm, CEO of Roy Group, on today's episode of the Executive Wins Podcast. Welcome to the Executive Wins Podcast, where senior leaders share their biggest wins so you can get inspired and grow your business. Here's your host, Gordon Sheppard. Welcome to the award-winning Executive Wins Podcast. I'm your host, Gordon Sheppard. Today, we are lucky to be joined by Ian Chisholm, CEO of Roy Group, a company with impeccable standards that is dedicated to helping leaders become outstanding mentors. You can learn about their work at roygroup.net. That's roygroup.net. On this episode, you'll learn how Ian and his team turn leaders into great mentors. You'll also find out about the big chance that he took when he and his family moved so he could take a job building a leadership development center on the Isle of Skye in Scotland. In addition, you'll find out how Ian grew as a leader by being mentored by a solid board, as he made sure to make the entire organization sustainable for multiple generations of leaders to come. This episode is a masterclass in how to build leadership capacity, along with an opportunity to learn about Ian's book called Quiet Champions: A Way Forward for Leaders in Turbulent Times. I also want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by the Executive Team Assessment. The Executive Team Assessment helps you to discover exactly where your leadership team is winning, where it's losing momentum, and what to do next. It involves a 3-step process. In step 1, we interview individuals on your leadership team to find out what's going well and what needs work, along with examining relevant documents, including your strategic plan. In step 2, we'll do an analysis of all the information and deliver an easy-to-understand report, along with doing a detailed presentation to your entire executive team. Finally, in step 3, we'll deliver a 90-day action plan, along with following up to keep everyone on your team accountable. For executive teams who really want an objective and experienced outside facilitator to help you improve performance and make your organization more profitable, the Executive Team Assessment is a great choice. Visit executivewins.com/executive team assessment to learn more, or send an email directly to me at gord@executivewins.com. That's gord@executivewins.com. I also want to say thanks to you, because the Executive Wins podcast now has more than 56,000 views on YouTube and over 580 hours of watch time, along with more than 2,500 audio downloads on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen. And of course, I am so grateful that the show won the Best New Podcast Award in the Quill Podcasting Awards in its first year of production. I also want to remind you that this interview follows a specific format that I created called The Anatomy of a Win, to help you learn the strategy, work plan, people, operations, and results behind every business win that you hear on this show. Because when you master this framework, your business will become more profitable. And now here's Ian Chisholm with his executive win. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Gord.
It is just so lucky to have you here, especially for the leaders that listen to this show, because we've got someone here who has put in the decades in helping leadership development on multi-continents and put the sort of thinking into all of it. And I've only just scratched the surface because you had a chance to send me your book, quiet champions. Can't wait to hear more about sort of the why and the what and what made it in there. But what strikes me is the thoughtfulness, the impact that you're having in the work that you do with the leaders that you work with would be a multiplier. It's absolutely a capacity builder. And I'm going to say, probably if we reached in far enough, has global implications for the way that you're going about your work in the leadership space. So I'm absolutely super excited to get into speaking with you. But there's a lot of people that haven't had a chance to meet you at all. So if you had to describe yourself, what would you say?
Gosh, that's the toughest question of all, of course. My name's Ian Chisholm. I am one of two founders of a little company called Roy Group. We're based in Victoria. We've been working here for 22 years, and we work with our clients to develop their next generation of leaders. But the way we do that is to help those senior teams become our next generation of mentors.
Tell me about this unique spin that you just put in there. You just said, okay, we're not just developing leaders. We want them to become the next generation of mentors. And there's something distinct in there. So, what's the thinking behind that statement? And why did you arrive to this approach?
Yeah, I think we learned from both positive and negative examples over the last 20 years that if the people that you work with, if your bosses, for lack of a better word, earn the word mentor in your life, you're going to have a very, very special culture capable of incredibly high performance. It's going to be engaged, and people are going to always be learning. And so I think the negative examples that we learned from is if we were working with the next generation cohort of leaders, we would get to this moment where they would say, "This is really great. This is exactly the kind of leader I dreamt I might be, but I just need to tell you it's not the way they lead up there in the C-suite." At that moment, we call it the Cinderella punch. The experiment is over. Because now, if they kept learning about leadership and practicing it, they'd have to live this double life of also emulating the people that they work for. So we've just found it better to work with a senior team first, get everybody earning the word mentor, and then we can work with them to develop their next generation of leaders. And that capacity stays inside the company.
I am completely in alignment with what you're talking about, and I love your unique approach. I can't wait to recommend it out in the world because this thing
Great.
of earn the word mentor and the discipline that, having gone through your book and picked out some of the highlights, the discipline that you're taking towards making this happen is absolutely unique. And you're getting it done. Like, it's really remarkable to see that you're getting it done. And I'm so glad to hear also about this starting at the top piece because there simply isn't enough of the capacity building there as folks are often in their busyness, I'm going to say, just in leadership and not taking the time. But earn the title mentor.
Mhm.
What a wonderful sentiment. And I mean, to arrive at that, what got you to arrive at that sort of specific, wonderful phrasing?
It was really a mentor of mine named Bob Chartier who talked about gift words, and that there's some words that you can't call yourself. They're gifted by somebody else. And if you've played the role of mentor in the story of somebody else's life, it's up to them to identify that, not you. And that one little constraint, I think, makes all the difference. All the right people get hungry to earn the word when you put it up on the top shelf where grandma keeps the gift words.
Where grandma keeps the gift words. Sorry, I'm sitting in my grandmother's kitchen in Verdun, Montreal.
Okay.
And there's a coffee mug on the top shelf there that I
It was a
always
special
remember
one.
looking up at. That was a very special one. You're reminding me of that very moment. And again, the eloquence already bursting through in the conversation and how lucky. In terms of your own journey, just I need to really get a feel for your pedigree, if you don't mind. Start
Sure.
me off sort of in those early 20s and just take me through a rip of maybe some of those credentials because I think they're
Sure.
substantial. So take me just through maybe a highlight reel to get me located with you.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I left our family grain farm when I was 16 and represented Canada at the United World College in New Mexico. That was a very meaningful experience for me. Came back to the University of Alberta, was desperate to get into med school. They took one look at my chemistry marks and said, "We can never let you be a doctor. So I know this is supposed to be about my credentials, but it's maybe the best thing that never happened." I was then lost in the wilderness a little bit. I had worked in the summers for the American Management Association, based out of New York, but they had several Canadian offshoots. And they would hire me for a couple months every summer to work for them in a program called Operation Enterprise. That's, in retrospect, that was where I kind of took the off ramp for a brave new adventure. When I didn't get into med school and was heartbroken, they brought me down to New York. It sounds glamorous. It wasn't. It was setting up a lot of meeting rooms and picking speakers up at the airport. And then over time, ended up in a leadership role there. And that's the executive win that we're going to talk about today. Happened early on in my career when an organization and really a person in Scotland heard about the work that we were doing with young people from tough realities in North America and asked if I would come over and see something that he was building. So, and then that took it from there.
And that took it from where, so these big chunky moments of like, want to be a doctor. Thankfully, it didn't work out for you and all the people you've helped along the way.
No.
Got involved with a good practice scenario that allowed you to get some good, chops under your belt early on. That led to a lever point, in a sense, to take that practice to another part of the world. And yeah, we are going to hear about that piece coming up. And then you got your last couple 22 years here. And I don't mean to overly simplify those things. There's a lot of earned moments, good nights and bad nights through all that time. And it's funny, you're taking me back to my early days in the early 90s when I was a production assistant on film sets in Toronto. And that would be, if I could bore you to tears, I'd
Not
take you back
glamorous.
there too. There you go. Not the
Super
glamorous
important.
stuff that we're looking for. So thank you for that setup, and thank you for earning the title mentor. This is a great start in terms of getting a flavor for what we're walking into. So it leads me to my first question here, which is, if you had to describe your biggest win, what would that win be, and how would you describe it?
Yeah, so it was a connection with a very charismatic gentleman named Norman Drummond. And he had heard about our work, and we had heard about his work. And so there was a communication back and forth to say, would you come? What was happening was Norman had raised a tremendous amount of money to build a leadership center at the north end of the Isle of Skye off the west coast of Scotland. It's about 5 hours from either Edinburgh or Glasgow. So a bit of a tough proposition. In addition to being a community center and a restaurant and a pulse at the heart of the local community, that's what he always used to call it. For revenue, it would also bring groups of young people from the city and from what we coined the term tough realities to come up to the Isle of Skye to reflect, outward bound, inward bound, to think about the leadership that might be theirs. We had this belief in New York that young people from tough socioeconomic realities actually had a lot of great raw material for leadership positions. And so that's what Norman had heard about. He had built this center. There were some very clear philosophical ideas at play, but he didn't know how to operationalize, and the clock was ticking. And so we needed to get this thing up and running fast. So we had between January 1st and June 3rd of 2000 to get up and running. And that's the executive win I'd love to tell you about.
Well, and it's fun because I think in our pre-interview, we talked about there's a moment in time where this offer comes in and you had to go, was it interview? What was the interview process?
Yeah, that's true. I think it was in October 1999. There was 3 or 4 finalists for the position. We flew over to Glasgow, did the 5-hour drive, and walked into a dinner where all 4 final candidates were kind of interacting with each other. We didn't really know that that's what was going to happen. So yeah, that was just a very long trip to end with a high stakes dinner.
And this is you and your partner wife at that
Yes,
time,
Anne-Marie.
and you're stepping into that situation. Did you know you had the job, or was it an interview, like at the dinner, like you showed up with the other candidates?
Yeah,
What
I
happened?
think the other 3 candidates had been interviewed that day, ending with dinner. And because I had come from overseas, my interview was the next morning.
And so were you on pins and needles? Did you know what was going to happen?
Um, I think the pins and needles probably have happened after we were offered the job, because now it was real. Are we moving our life? And we had two sons at that point. Are we moving our life to the Isle of Skye, or do we have perfectly good jobs back in the States, which we did? And yeah, there's a very deep memory of we were staying in a B&B up in the attic, and I went down the stairs to phone the committee to say that we were not going to accept. And I tried that 3 times and kept coming back up the stairs. And Anne Marie said, "If we say we're going to take this job, do you think you'll be able to make the call?" And I said, "I think so. Like, I think I do actually want to be a part of this." So,
Isn't that wonderful? So an instinctive moment, again, another one of those sort of moments where you're just like, whatever, the instinct wins out over anxiety or whatever it
yeah.
is that you have going forward, and
And
you
a
take
great
this
partner.
chance
And a
and a
great
great
partner
part,
who was
right?
prepared to
Yeah,
go
and
for it.
like right those that team aspect in your relationship, able to support that and take your family over there for an adventure, where because you had all kinds of options at that time for sure. With the pedigree that you would have had, you could have gone in many different directions. That's really wonderful. So now you've got this understanding of how to help young leaders coming from certain socioeconomic backgrounds that you mentioned. So you're loaded for bear for that. You're getting some support arriving at this center. You've got this 6 month or 8 month, whatever, 6 month ramp up really,
Yeah.
really quickly to receive cohorts, I'm assuming, of these kids to come into the situation. So what kind of happened next in this situation there? You got them up and running and started to get a feel for the programming that you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, we'd done all kinds of programs in the States. So the program part of it was not new for me, but I like doing things really well. And I think that was I've been told by the committee that it was when I used the word impeccable that my expectations for what would happen inside this beautiful center were going to be impeccable. That's the way we had run the program out of New York, and that's the way I just really believe you have one chance to send a message to people's hearts that the work that we're going to do here together is important, and that's all about quality.
Well, and
So,
I'm right in there with you because I could just only reflect on the Roy Group branding alone as
ah,
sort of an example of
very
impeccable.
kind of you.
Honestly, I can say if I have been through your website, I've looked at your
Uh,
book, I've seen the things that are in there, and you can feel the high standard that you're bringing
yeah.
at least to that. And then again, I can hear that you brought it to that moment in time as well.
What I didn't have is a lot of operational or financial background. Like I was 27 years old.
Mm.
And so there was certainly lots of imagination and lots of vision and lots of energy. That's the nice thing about being young is that you can work long days and you can really put the elbow grease into something. But I think, and we had lots of imagination. I would say that we were able to start with academies right away. So groups of 24 with maybe a few chaperones. We were ready June 3rd. Princess Anne agreed to be the patron of the charity. And so all of a sudden we had a royal opening, which makes all the construction companies get things done on time. It's actually a very effective strategy to make sure things are done on time. And we had this code. We had this code of 6 values: awareness, focus, creativity, integrity, perseverance, and service. And we knew that all of our programming could kind of stem from those things. And we really believed those things deeply. They were on our jackets. We had the values on our jackets, on our sleeves. So we just began. We just started an incredible board of directors. One of the things that Norman had done, in addition to choosing a very young and inexperienced CEO, he surrounded that CEO with one of the most effective and influential boards in all of Scotland. Uh, Amazing experience to report into those folks 4 times a year, to argue, to challenge each other, and to convince each other of the best way forward. So yeah, that was really one of the key successes was that we were able to get going right away, and we did that. And there was this wonderful constellation of governance and mentorship around me and my very young team.
How lucky to have this great soup mix to describe this. And I'm going to
W-
do something painful for just a second and just
Yeah,
say,
do
in
it.
about a sentence or two, let's let's summarize the win. Is the win getting the role or getting this program up and running? Just summarize it for me in a sentence or two.
The win.
Yeah.
The win was probably over the course of the center's first 5 years, getting it a firm financial foothold and a reputation for excellence, so that that 5-hour drive was not a barrier anymore.
And you are on a rocket. The learning curve is the steepest learning curve you can identify because you're good for programming, but then you got to go deal with a board and then you got to deal with these expectations. And I'm sure there's sort of little blips here and there along the way, if that makes
Oh,
sense.
and run a restaurant and a facility and be in a totally different culture. 75% of my neighbors, English was not their first language, Gaelic was. So this is like, which amazingly, you'll love this. In the Gaelic language, there's not really a word for leadership. There's like directorship and stewardship, but there we were running this international center of leadership in a place that didn't have a word for that in its home language. So, uh, and I was a brand new dad and a brand new husband. It was all,
Wow.
yeah,
So
it
pick
was,
a 5 year stretch where you don't feel like sleeping much, and in terms of all the things that would have gone on with it, and yet the win is over the 5 year period. I'm going to say delivering essentially on what that promise was, and you got to get
yeah.
that done.
The
Massive win.
organization had made a big promise to the world, and yeah, in thinking about your equation for an executive win, it was really my job and my team's job to deliver on that promise.
And you delivered. And so what's great is it gets us into the anatomy of the win, which is to talk about the
Love it.
strategy, the work plan, people, operations, and results behind the win.
Love it.
Strategically, if we think about vision, mission, values, goals, this kind of thing, you mentioned 6 values were in play. Do you know what I mean? That would have been sort of one of the guideposts, for example. You've
Definitely.
mentioned the strategy discussions that you would have had, at a high level with this really robust board that you've described. Any other sort of strategic highlights that you'd like to point to when you think about pulling off this win to deliver?
Yeah, and even just thinking about our talk today has made me think about it. It's now, more than 20 years out. I think partnership, because we were so far away from everywhere, there were a number of key partnerships along the way. Um, the first was with the Greater Easterhouse Development Company. They were doing work with young people, the same young people that we wanted to work with, the same profile, and they were in their community, and we had this incredible experience up on Sky. So even though it looked like we were maybe competitors, we got in the room together and banged out something called the WOW program, which stood for What Other Way. And it was a series of months in Easterhouse, a week up on Skye, and then follow up for 6 months back in Glasgow. Now we were really, connected to a community wanting to position its young people to take on the responsibility of leadership. It
So
was,
that partnership piece being in there, and you could hear then that would come up at the board discussions. It would be coming up in your discussions. It would be coming up in your relationship building that you were doing. And then to get impact, it's one thing to go to camp. You know what I mean? In a sense, or go ways to a center
right,
and have an
exactly,
experience. Another thing
exactly.
to have that multi-month integration opportunity to give it legs to get those things into practice. Well, that is just a wonderful piece of the puzzle to hear,
Yeah.
because if I hear partnerships being essential to the strategy, anytime we have a strategy, we need a work plan. And so we've heard about this sort of 5 year horizon. There's sort of, I'm going to say somewhere in 2000, you say, yes, I'm going to do this. And then over the 60 months or whatever it is, that might be the time horizon that we're looking at. Any highlights along that? If we got the timeline out and we marked the significant moments along the way, is it just sort of surviving in the first year, or was it, and then any big moments along the way and that kind of thing?
I think it was surviving in the first year, year and a half, and also being honest about that. Not trying to save face, but this board of directors, particularly some of the members on it, you shut the door and it's honesty time. We're not trying to look impressive. We're not trying to, and that was a great learning for me, that I didn't need to be intimidated or try to impress these folks. the sooner we could get to really honest reporting about what had happened, what needed to happen. So after about 18 months, we realized, even though what we were doing was very impactful, it wasn't financially sustainable. We had stopped the bleeding of kind of the operational startup, but now we were dragging along the bottom. We were never going to be able to reconcile, at this point, some pretty sizable debt that we had taken on. And so the second, like the work plan, in retrospect, of course, it sounds like it was all planned. There was an incredible moment where one of my directors pulled me aside, and we had talked about how we weren't coming out of debt. And she said, "I really think you should spend a morning with my husband." I was like, "Great. You know, if my director tells me I'm going to spend a day with her husband, great." So I went to their place on a Saturday, and he was an incredible gentleman. John McAreevy. There was a desk, there was a laptop, and there was a chair for me. And I didn't know that this is what he was doing, but he started this, like, asking me questions and building a spreadsheet at the same time. And so he knew that I spoke the language of concept and program and even philosophy, right? How to make this philosophy come alive. But he was literally translating that into the language of business, into a cash flow. And after about 4 or 5 hours of that interrogation, he told me to go away for a few hours. And I came back a few hours later, and he said, "There's good news and bad news. The good news is, in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a sum there, and you can leave that. If you've got 4 years left in your contract, you can leave that amount of money times 4 for the next CEO. And that would unquestionably be an ideal scenario. I mean, that would be a very healthy organization in its first 5 years of startup. The bad news," he said, "is that there's 6 cells in this spreadsheet that do not exist." And I was like, "Oh, what are they?" He's like, "I don't know, but you have to create something that's worth X amount with this much profit, and you need to do it 6 times a year to get to that ideal scenario." Now, the money involved, what he was really telling me is that if I stayed the course that I had set as a young CEO, I was going to bankrupt the business. But he didn't say it that way to me. He made it so that it was a game. You got to go out and find something that's worth 60,000 pounds. It's got to have 20% profit points on it. And you got to do it 6 times a year to kind of bring the nose up out of this. And so he just sent me into the world knowing what I was looking for, which it didn't take long to find at all.
Remarkable. And it's
Yeah,
funny. So, with all of your work on the mentorship side, and again, we're going to catch up with this at the end of the interview with what you're doing now. That's one of those moments that would have been informative to the
incredible,
formation of your work because you just
incredible.
described. And isn't
Total
that interesting?
change of course.
Isn't that remarkable? Like a day. How
A day.
lucky that you, as a leader, could spend a day with someone that could
Right.
shift the course of an organization because you were at the right moment to listen. Crisis, don't waste a good crisis, Mr. Churchill. And then we get into that moment, and he gives you not a browbeating,
Right.
but sort of whatever it is, a set of breadcrumbs to follow along in a
Yeah.
sense to where you could take that out. Isn't that so? First year we're surviving. We know we're not on the financial right track. We hit a moment where it's just like, oh, and then the pathway becomes clearer to you, and you can then take on that next set of leadership skills or whatever it was that you needed to sort of ramp up on, which was again around the profit side of things, and you had a pathway to do it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and more so partnership. For us to create a program that was worth that amount of money, we were going to need some. If I had been a baseball team, I needed some serious talent,
Yeah, you're out there. You're out there. The free agent market was looking good, and you were going out there to go and find
and we
your
knew
next
that that was
slugger.
the way out of this, was to invest in some great partnerships. So we were able to work with some incredible practitioners. They brought what they did as a living to our philosophy and this incredible place, and we created something called the Gemini Project,
Hmm.
which was in Scotland. This was a very big deal because what we were doing was taking 10 young people who had graduated from our academies and pairing them with 10 executives from the finance sector in Edinburgh. So Glasgow and Edinburgh, like there's this awesome, the kids from Glasgow will tell you that a funeral in Glasgow is more fun than a wedding in Edinburgh. This is the rivalry they have. So yeah, 10 executives from the banks in Edinburgh and 10 young, savvy, street smart leaders from the streets of Glasgow. And we would train them separately in the city how to coach each other. And then we would bring them up to the Isle of Skye together for 7 days. We'd do a simulation or an exercise every morning, and every afternoon the executives would coach the young people from Glasgow. And then after the coffee break, the kids from Glasgow would coach these executives up this wall and down again. Like it was fantastic. One of the most wonderful pieces of work I've ever been a part of.
What a rewarding opportunity, one, to create the pond for, in a sense,
Mm.
and then allow this cross-populating in that my grandma, my mother's from Glasgow.
Oh,
I've
she
got
is.
a little of a feel for that little vibe that you're talking about, so I love it.
Nice.
And so then we get in here and we've got again another real world thing. So we have this partnership down to Glasgow in another organization. We got a partnership out to Edinburgh. You can see the tendrils of sorts moving around Scotland as a whole, and I think maybe surpassing expectations of the board at this point. Is that fair, the way it's going?
The expectation was definitely not to fail. So they saw this as that we had put forward a strategy that could take us in the right direction.
And also talking about looking for the sluggers, looking for people that can kind of participate and pay for it in a sense. So we talk
Well,
about these executive level, like that sort of is a good
yeah.
cohort to get after in terms of leadership development, and then pulling together multiple worlds. And those executives would add great stories. It's funny, I'm just aching to hear the first name. You don't need to say the full name, but is there a first name of one of the kids that is memorable from one of those ones? And I don't mean to put you on the spot if you can't, but
Oh,
is there a
of
first
course
name
I
that you
do.
can tell a little story? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, no, I can remember a wonderful young guy, and he'd be 45 now, named Malky, who was not messing around. Like a serious look on his face every morning, and he took it seriously that he was paired with this gentleman from Glasgow, from Edinburgh, and he was going to help him. And there was always one of us in the room so that we could provide some feedback on the quality of their coaching after, so that people got better and better and better. So we got to witness a lot of these discussions. And Malky on one day just listened really, really carefully about, a political issue that was happening in the office. And Malky listened, listened, listened. And then his first question was, "So why don't you just fire this prick?" Which, in explaining why he didn't want to fire this problem employee, the guy really started to dig into what this was about. And Malky took it from there. But yeah, no, it was
Another
great.
moment of again, what's nice here is breaking the barriers of mentorship. We don't need to be old wise and with white flowing through our hair to have mentorship. It's a two-way street. It's, you know what I mean? We can learn and it opens up that possibility as well. Strategy, work plan. We've heard some highlights along the way. There's many people involved. I
Mhm,
heard you and your wife and your family
mhm.
are involved early. You've got the right attitude to go on an adventure. You've got the resiliency to get through the first 18 months and have those board discussions, the resiliency through then getting up the new programming and adjusting mindset around helping things to kind of get moving forward. You've got these partnerships that are occurring along the way. In terms of people and attitudes, are there highlights that you like to bring up for this win
Yeah, no,
that I'm,
the
yeah?
whole, and Gord, this would be, I mean, this was the reason that I wrote the book, is because there was just so many exquisite people involved with this story. Like the board of directors were incredible. I'm like eternally grateful for them being around me and believing that I could do this. The team, this is a part of the world where people work really hard. They call it grafting. Your grandma would have called it grafting. They are grafters. So in that way, we couldn't go wrong. As long as we pointed people in the right direction, I knew that they would work hard. Funders, other business people on Sky that were very keen to see something like this take root. Um, Connections. I mean, every time we did one of these programs, we met more and more people, and our network was building, and they had something that they really believed in to tell others about. It was the last iteration. Uh, we came to some of the people in our network brought us to the attention of a gentleman named Sir Tom Hunter. And Tom Hunter really wants to change Scotland. And he's a very wealthy man. And he was also very smart. He went to the Scottish executive and said, I would like to do some innovative pilots that could change society. And I'd like to partner with you on that. So 50% government funding, 50% my own money. I want to do some experiments. And I'm also going to pay for independent third party research. And so if these experiments that we do work, the government will roll this out going forward. And the assignment, and we were brought to his attention, and it was the story of the Gemini project that he heard about. He thought that was pretty cool. But what he had us in mind for was to work with head teachers from across the country. And it makes me so happy to say that 22 years later, every head and deputy head teacher in the country goes up to Sky for that experience to this day.
Boy, from a legacy point of view, that is
That was
massive.
transformational.
That is transformational.
And that started because people knew us and put us in front of the right opportunities to say, they can do it. They don't do it yet, but this team will pull this off for you. That's the
Wow.
reputation we had.
Sorry. Thanks for not getting into med school. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's just a great,
Yeah,
like, when
that
I
was,
think about leadership, that's fantastic. And that right, and nice that he didn't fund it all privately, which I'm sure he could have.
yeah,
He
sure.
got into that partnership
Oh, he was
thinking
smart, very smart.
and understood how to do it. And then you folks had the readiness, right? You were ready to take that on and ready to have that go through and to think that there's a legacy where it's still in play. It's one thing to get things through 5 years or 10 years, to get it through multi-decade where it becomes best practice and absorbed.
Right.
That's fantastic. And that does speak to that country level leadership. That's one of those ones that actually makes me super hopeful in this 2026 times, where you think that actually is in play as a guardrail for leadership and what leadership can be.
Sure.
From what you've just described, I'm so glad that you've shared that little moment. Strategy, work plan. There's people involved, which of course we just go on and on about. There's always operationalizing situations. So again, you got there in the first year. You're running these multiple parts of the operation. You had to learn how to make money and choose different folks for your team and at different moments along the way. Any other sort of operational highlights that you'd like to point out for this win along the way?
I mean, I think we were, because the operation was so multifaceted, and with these three iterations from the academies to the Gemini project to the head teacher work, there was also a restaurant happening. There was also, this huge facility being taken care of. There was also the local community dynamic. In retrospect, I think how we operationalized is through people. And we found, we knew what we needed, and we found somebody who had that gift. And we just trusted them to say, like, do it, own it. This part of the operation is yours. Run it the way you want to and run it really well, because it's got to be part of this overall brand that's about quality and execution.
There's a
So
wonderful
we
leader who was
trusted
on
a
the
lot of
show.
people.
A wonderful leader who's on the show. Her name is Bianca Jade Parsons.
Uh-huh.
Her little phrase she picked up from a board member was put aces in their places. And it sounds like you did that over and over again as you sort of operationalized what you needed to do. Strategy, work plan, people, operations. Finally, there's results. Quantitative and qualitative results. Quantitatively, it's funny, don't mean to bug you about the number of teachers through the program, number of young people through, number of CEOs through the program. Now, I'm not trying to nail you for the exact stats, but
Yeah.
there's a bunch of all those people that have experienced. Any quantitative highlights that you'd like to kind of point out along the way?
Yeah, no, I should have got the numbers for you, because I'm sure that somebody in the Scottish executive knows exactly how many, but it will be thousands from the number
Thousands.
of people that go every year in groups
Yeah,
of
and so that
24
instinct to
over
poach you
25
out of
years.
that instinct to poach you out of New York, right?
Yeah,
Imagine planting
no,
that seed in 2000, and here we are, quarter century later, with that level of impact in the it is in the thousands for
right.
sure. And then the multiplier effect, if we actually went on and took that data that was gathered there's an exponential aspect because it'd be hard to track, but certainly not difficult to imply when
Right.
those teachers go back
Right.
to their world, when those CEOs go back to their world, when those young people go back to their worlds as well.
And the key result for me, and I really hope this doesn't make me sound like a pirate, but I knew why I had been poached, and it was because I could make this thing sustainable.
Yeah.
And so the fact that the center now is about a $3 million budget a year, but
Yep.
in Canadian dollars, I think that's like 1.6 million in UK pounds for a little town of 500 people to have a nation building brand in its little town, creating those jobs. Uh, yeah, that was a stretch to make that feasible. I certainly didn't do it by myself. And I think, there's been 20 years of work since Anne Marie and I left there that's made it more and more grounded and more founded. Uh, but yeah,
But I like you said, essentially what you're saying is I did that. And I think I'm glad you said it because I can tell you 60 plus leaders that I've had on this show, the leaders aren't saying it enough. And it's not bragging. It's just, you know what? I did that part of that moment. And we don't have to aw shucks that. You just have to say, yeah, you did that. And look at again the legacy and impact of what that means along the way. And qualitatively,
yeah,
how's it feel?
yeah. No, I would say I am so proud that we made that choice up in the attic of the B&B to like let's go down the stairs and do this. The only thing that makes me prouder is how hard people have worked since we left and what they've been capable of. And yeah, you get a chance every once in a while, you get a chance to be part of a big story, and that was definitely a huge opportunity.
Well, I'm massive, and I love the first name. You know what I mean? Hearing this young person come in and change a senior leader's life, and I'm
Yeah.
sure that again, if we went on and we are drinking wine, there'd be dozens of those sort of things. I
No,
need to
there's
read.
lots.
I'm
There's
holding your book.
lots.
Thank you for sending it to me. Quiet Champions: A Way Forward for Mentors in Turbulent Times. I need to speak about this now. It's funny. We normally end the interviews right about here, but I think this book is important to speak about, and I want people to know about it so they reach out, get it, get to know you, get to know what you're doing. I just need to leave in the last portion of why did I write this book? I'll read this back and I don't expect you to remember it. Becoming these quiet champions for the next generation together represents the greatest influence our lives will have on steering humanity towards a better place. When you wrote the book, that was real. What's that sentiment?
Um, I think it's I think it's looking back even over what we've just talked about. If a constellation of mentors hadn't come out to play for me the way they did, the results would have been compromised, and I would not be the person that I am. And there's some interesting math. We did this at the book launches across Western Canada last November, is to think about somebody who's earned the word mentor in your life. And that comes very quickly to people. And then you ask some questions. Oh, how old were you when they really stepped up for you and you felt that difference? There's a pattern, late 20s, early 30s. Like there's a ballpark. And then the question is, and how old was that person when they stepped up for you that way? Like 50s. And then the last question is, and how old are you now? And the penny suddenly drops and they realize, wow, as much as I really held that person in high regard and really thought that they, had a perfect way of doing this, they were as old as I am now, which means it's our turn to step up this way and pay it forward. So I think it's just math coming from the
Well,
non-financial guy.
it's a lot more than math for sure.
Yeah.
Bruce Barrett, I was 16. My dad had died young when
Wow.
he was 51 years old, and he helped mentor me and get me through those last years of high school, not in number of hours, but in right moments.
Wow.
And thank you for getting me to get a chance to think about Bruce. I just can't get enough of him in terms of remembering how important he
Yeah.
was. And I've got another few in my mind that are just, you just said it, lightning in a bottle, and that chance to earn the title mentor along the way. Okay. Well, we could talk for hours. This is just so lucky to have you here. I always, when I get wonderful leaders on like yourself, if you had a few sentences for the next leader that's listening to this podcast right now, what's something that you like to pass along in a few sentences to make sure they know and they can put into action?
Yeah, I think from a single spark comes a raging fire. It's that simple. That's what human beings do. You take those few sparks, maybe you make them yourself, maybe that's how it starts. It doesn't look impressive, it looks almost impossible. And from those few sparks comes something that you never know where it will go and what difference it will make. So just stick to your knitting.
And get those sparks going. And I'm going to say be impeccable as often as you can. Ian, thank you so much for being on the show.
Great. Thank you so much.
Be impeccable in everything you do. Form the right partnerships and help leaders to become outstanding mentors so they can build the next generation of leaders. That is how Ian Chisholm and his team win every day. Thank you, Ian, for your inspiring win. And if you enjoyed listening to this episode, then make sure to check out our upcoming episodes, which include how to build a business and sell it for everything it's worth, winning with Carrie Lutzen, owner of Anchored Leadership. And if you want to learn how Executive Wins services like coaching, training, and facilitation can help to align your leadership team so they can get more profitable results, then visit executivewins.com to learn how. You can also subscribe to the Executive Wins newsletter to stay up to date on the podcast, live events, education opportunities, and more. Visit executivewins.com/newsletter to sign up. And if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe, and share it with a fellow leader. And don't forget to check out our resources and links in the show notes. And keep listening to the Executive Wins podcast for more inspiring wins that will help you to grow yourself, your team, and your entire business. Thanks for listening to the Executive Wins podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe as we bring you more inspiring wins from outstanding leaders so you can grow your business.